Hi everyone, my name's Nick and I'm the Country Manager here at Beepo. We offer outsourcing services for real estate agencies that are looking to become significantly more productive and efficient. Let me give you a bit of a rundown about how our real estate team actually works. At Beepo, we have many positions to assist our clients in the real estate industry. These include sales assistants, trust account and marketing staff. We also have a couple of our most popular products, the property management assistants and Rock End property assistants.
Debate in the property industry is hot right now about lead generation. Now this is where websites set up to act as a bit of a go-between between potential buyers and sellers and real estate agents. In most cases, they're not real estate agents, but they say that they're going to help you get in touch with a good agent. There is a clip of the ticket along the way, and that's where they claim some of the agent's commission to make that introduction. We're now seeing at least one of the major listing portals, realestate.com.au, stepping into the breach, and as well as charging the most expensive fees in the world to list on their site, they're now claiming some of the agent's commission as well. Is this a good thing? Well, joining me to discuss this is industry heavyweight Douglas Driscoll from Star Partners. Doug, surely from a consumer point of view, this is a good thing, isn't it?
You would think so, yes, Kevin. The issue, however, I've got is that I think that these services are somewhat misleading. Although they're not said directly, I think it's implied that actually these third-party facilitators, so to speak, they almost suggest that they'll do a lot of the heavy lifting for consumers, i.e. they'll kind of be fairly morphological in their approach, they'll do the due diligence, and they'll go and mystery shop different agents to find out who's best. The reality is that just doesn't happen. The reality is that they will pass these leads to whoever's prepared to actually pay for them. Now, some of the very best agencies in the country will refuse to pay for these leads, which means that the consumer will never then be put in touch with them. And the ones who will pay sometimes are the worst agents in those respective suburbs. So one of the things that consumers don't realise is that it is also a paid service. Okay, yes, they're not paying for it as a consumer, but obviously the agent in the background is. And I think if they realised just how limited some of the process is, I think they'd probably shy away from it and do their own homework and due diligence.
Doug, I want to talk to you about the future in a moment, but surely it seems to me that the horse is already bolted. I mean, there are so many of these organisations that are already set up, and as I said, you know, one of the major portals is now looking at doing something similar. Is it too late? Is the industry left it too long?
No, but I think the time to act is now. I think what we need to do is we need to kind of have a general thought about this and really understand what the future ramifications or repercussions could be for us as an industry. You know, you're old enough when that you'll probably remember a time in real estate before the portals even existed. And in the space of 15 years or so, they've completely dominated or monopolized the buyer lead space. And for me, this is just a case of kind of really completing the circle, so to speak. It's still very much in an embryonic stage, in a sense. Obviously, these companies now have existed for anywhere between 3 and 5 years. If you look at that space at the moment in terms of market percentages, I think it's somewhere in the region of sort of 5% of all property transactions in this country involve an intermediary at this moment in time. To put that into context, only Ray White as a group are involved in more property transactions than the likes of your open agents. So it's growing rapidly and it will continue to grow exponentially over time. But what we need to understand is if we follow this path, what will the future look like? And when we're in an industry where our margins are ever eroding, they will erode further. So theoretically, we could be the architects of our own demise or downfall if we're not careful.
So why are you sounding a note of caution now about this? Or are you, because you said to me that it's not too late?
Well, I've been talking about this now for 3 or 4 years. So this is, for me, this isn't new. As you said, these companies have been around for a while. So I've been quite consistent in what I've been saying for some time. I guess perhaps why I'm now more vocal and my head has appeared above the parapet is that REA are making a power play. And I've been saying this for a number of years now, that that's exactly what ultimately will happen. They have essentially I suppose, saturated the buyer space. They can't get any more value out of that unless they continue to put their fees up year on year. Obviously, there are fewer transactions, there are fewer agents around. So I think they've kind of maxed out there. So being the organisation they are, they're very canny and they're looking to diversify and look at other revenue streams. Now, this for them is an obvious play. And the fear that I have with REA in particular, opposed to some of the other players in this space, is that they have the hearts and the minds of the public. We as an industry, let's face it, we despise them, but the public loves them. They are the kind of the proverbial one-stop shop. So as soon as they've entered this space, I'm not suggesting it's game over, but all of a sudden the dynamic is going to shift and shift very, very aggressively. So if we're not too careful and we don't become too reliant on them as seller leads in the same way that we did with buyer leads, it really could ultimately come back and bite us and hurt us severely.
So you mentioned already that it's almost like low-hanging fruit. A lot of the leading agents in Australia now won't acknowledge these leads. They won't pay that commission. Are you saying that all agents should do the same thing?
Look, it's not down to me to talk to agents about what they should and shouldn't do. I can only air my opinion and concerns. You talk about low-hanging fruit. That's an interesting analogy, because the analogy I would use is, yes, it may be low-hanging fruit, but it's low-hanging fruit in the Garden of Eden, and we all know what happened there. So my view is that, look, all I'm asking agents to do is stop and think and look at the future, have some foresight. And in order to apply foresight, we need to apply hindsight. If we had our time again with the buyer leads, I'm sure we'd do things very, very differently. And the reality is we didn't stop and think 15 years ago. And now is an opportunity to actually take stock of where we're at. And we need to look into the future and say, well, if we continue on this path, what will happen? Because the new REA product at the moment is quite competitively priced. And don't forget, it's in its infancy. It's only launched a matter of weeks ago. But at the moment, I think they're charging about $200 for a lead. But once upon a time, they probably only charged $200 to advertise a property for sale on their site. So their costs will go up exponentially, but only as and when, obviously, as an industry, we have a greater need for this service. My view is we need to not be complacent, not be lazy, and actually not take the path of least resistance on this, because the margins are ever eroding. I can't stress that enough. And if we're giving away, with open agent, it's 15-20% of our commission. Well, the margins on a sale are probably only that anyway. So what's the point in doing it in the first place if you're not going to actually make any profit on it? It defies business logic, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, we're already seeing a number of low-cost operators in the market. We've seen, a few of them come to a sticky end, like Purple Bricks and organisations like that. But surely over time, we're our own worst enemy. We gave up the rights to the listing information. We effectively gave it away, and now we have to pay to actually advertise the same product. To me, it almost seems like it's too late.
Look, I hope not. But you're absolutely right. We are our own worst enemy. We're Dr. Frankenstein. We made that monster. Now, my fear is we're actually making his twin brother, and I think that at the very least, there needs to be some education around this. And I think that someone like myself in a leadership position within the industry, it would be much easier for me just to keep my head down and shut up and almost see it as not my problem or concern. But it is. I've got numerous principals that I talk to on a daily basis. I feel their pain. They're struggling with the market as it is. They're struggling to maintain margins. And obviously they have a choice. But obviously the issue here is that as an industry, we need to make this decision, because REA and the likes of the major portals, they can be very divisive. I mean, if you even think about the sales technique of actually selling some of their premium listing products and stuff, I don't think it makes the slightest bit of difference whether you're at the top of the list or the bottom of the list. If you're serious about property, you're going to go on a page 2. It's not like looking for a florist on Google. If you're interested in buying real estate, you are going to go to page 1 or page 2, especially when there are so few properties around. The issue is that obviously the REA salesperson will go to an office, they'll sell this premium product, and then they'll go next door to the agent, the competitor, and say, guess what, so-and-so's done it. And it's this whole fear of missing out. So they're very smart in their strategy. And if the best agent in the area won't accept the lead, the likelihood is maybe the second or third will. But I don't think that's good for the industry, and I certainly don't think that's good for the consumer at large, because the consumer at large is trusting the likes of REA to deliver the very best agent. And if they only knew what was happening. Another great example, without digressing too much, is that in the instance that my understanding is, and I very much stand to be corrected if I'm wrong on this, but my understanding is if an agent, the best agent in an area, refuses the lead from REA based on their new product, an REA representative calls the vendor who's clicked on that person to obviously provide an appraisal, and will go back and say, John or Jane, that agent that you've selected has refused the opportunity. Now, that's just not right, because what the consumer isn't then told is that actually they've refused the opportunity based on the fee that's involved. So there's a lot of grey around this, and I think we need to make it very black and white. And I think we need to have a fairly robust conversation as an industry, because otherwise this is just going to happen with or without us, and it's going to be too late to do anything about it.
Doug, what's the public perception of this?
Well, I think the public perception is positive, and this is what I'm trying to say. In the realestate.com.au and Domain, they're national institutions. They're cherished almost, because they are a one-stop shop. Obviously the consumer at large doesn't pay a penny for anything that they provide. And if they think that they're doing the majority of the heavy lifting, if they think they're going out and doing the beauty parade and selecting the very best agent for their individual needs, why wouldn't they? I mean, if I challenge you, Kevin, I mean, obviously you're within the industry, so you know the mechanics, but if you're a consumer and I said to you, let us take the heavy lifting out of finding an agent, let us find the best agent that's best suited for you, and it's a free service, why wouldn't you utilize it? What the consumer doesn't realize is, as I said, the mechanics, the very workings behind all of this. They don't realize that, yes, it's advertised as a free service for them, but it isn't a free service for the people that obviously they're providing the leads to. And I think there needs to be another level of transparency around this, because often what will happen is then the consumer will end up with a 5th, 6th, 7th best choiced agent. And ultimately, if they're doing that, then it reflects on the price or the result they're going to achieve. Yeah,
and unfortunately, that's not the only way people find the 4th, 5th or 6th agent, worst agent in this case. Sometimes it happens, and it happens quite often. What are the economics on this, just so as the consumer can understand the impact of this on the industry? At what level, how much commission can an agent give away and still be viable?
Well, great question. I think certainly in regards to the consumer, as much as it pains me to say, I don't think the consumer really cares about our economics as long as we get the job done. I mean, if we're hurting, then that's certainly no consideration for them. But as an industry, if you look at something like the Macquarie Bank benchmarking studies, obviously some of the very best real estate businesses across the country bank with them, and their most recent benchmarking study actually showed that the average real estate business across Australia operates at about a 14-15% net profit margin. Now, if you were to deep dive or drill down into that, it's then not inconceivable that the average real estate business is operating on an average sale in and around a 10% net profit margin. So if you look at that by way of economics, and then you think about the likes of OpenAgent, who are charging maybe a 15 or 20% clip of the ticket, you're actually making a loss. Yes, there's intangibles there around obviously the other opportunities that may arise because of the sale, but just based on that sale and that sale alone, actually a lot of real estate businesses will actually be losing money by paying that referral fee in the first place and accepting the lead.
Is there a likelihood here that some of the major franchise groups may be able to step in and almost sit between the two, like they're for their own organisations?
I would be very welcome to any such conversation or meeting, and I think you'll find that most of my peers and contemporaries would be as well. And in fact, I know that there are already meetings and conversations kind of taking place at this moment in time. And as I said earlier, my view is that I have an obligation, a responsibility to my people. They pay my wages in the same way that the same applies to any other of the groups around. So I think that we should do our best to safeguard the future interests of our industry and its incumbents. Because if we're not too careful, we've already been disrupted, but if we're not too careful, we'll be disintermediated. And my fear is that that'll happen a lot quicker or sooner than we anticipate.
Yeah, because you become very fearful about the future, painting the picture. Australia is one of the most expensive places to advertise a property online. We know that that's a fact. In fact, in America, they cannot understand why we pay so much to get onto realestate.com.au and Domain and the other portals. And the other thing too is that our commissions are much less here, where we get one commission for both sides, buyer and seller. But in places like America, it's quite normal for there to be a buyer commission and a seller commission. So we're copping it at both ends.
Well, I think certainly, Kevin, one thing I don't want to appear to be is dystopian. For those that know me, they'll know I'm actually a very positive person, although it may not sound like it. But, I'm not Willy Wonka. I'm not here to sugarcoat things. For me, this is bleedingly obvious. And I think we just need to wake up to it and do so before it's too late. One of the other things I would say is, and I'd pose the question, would REA be able to get away with charging what they charge in this country if it wasn't for vendor-paid advertising? Vendor-paid advertising is quite unique. It probably only exists in 2 or 3 countries around the world. If it didn't exist, REA would not be able to charge what they charge. There's absolutely no question about that. So certainly they're taking advantage of it and leveraging it. And listen, as much as it may sound like it, this isn't an attack on REA. This is really a wake-up call to the industry. REA are only able to get away with what they're able to get away with because we fall asleep at the wheel, because obviously we're too lazy, too ignorant, too myopic to do anything about it. Again, this is not an attack on REA, it's a wake-up call to the industry. And if we don't do something about it soon, it will be too late. And we'll be looking back on this interview in 5-10 years and go, that Pommy fella, maybe he had something after all, maybe he does know what he's talking about.
Well, tell us what the solution is. What should the industry be doing?
I think the industry needs to have a long, hard look at itself and just, again, in order to be a thought leader, I think one needs to have, hindsight, insight, and foresight. And I think if you want to look at what the future looks like, you just need to look at the past and look at where we were with buyer leads. We were happy to accept them. We were, happy to pay for the privilege, but that's almost out of control now. It's becoming prohibitive. And I think in order to look at what the future may look like, we just need to look at that circumstance and situation and actually wonder, will the same thing happen? So I think at the very least from this conversation, I would love for agents to at least think twice about it, because they may not think that 150 or 200 bucks is much for a lead, but that will soon become 300, 500, 1,000. Then all of a sudden it becomes 10% of clip of the actual sales ticket, then 20%. And then all of a sudden, as I said, we don't have any margins at all. And clearly that would be of grave concern to me and indeed the industry as a whole.
Yeah, well, of course, it's a cautionary note. And one thing we do know is that history teaches us a lot of wonderful lessons. And we've seen the history of what happened, as you said, with those seller leads. So, we're on the same path. Hey, Doug, thank you very much for your time. Thanks for drawing our attention to this and explaining it in such a great way. I appreciate your time.
No, my pleasure.
Are you ready to create healthier, wealthier, and more beautiful spaces? My name is Naomi Finlay, and welcome to The Reno Show. Each week, I'll be bringing you a value-packed episode of incredible room reveals, hands-on renovation tips, upcycling hacks, and so much more. I am passionate about renovating for life, and I can't wait to take you on this journey, creating spaces you can thrive in. Get ready for our best season yet.